Welcome to our second Lunch and Learn session. Thank you all for being here. This session is part of a two-part mini-series designed to build community among estate planning attorneys in advance of the upcoming Heckerling Institute in Orlando, Florida, which is kicking off next week. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I will be facilitating this series. I'm a lawyer, a Gavel expert and professional no-code, low-code developer, a legal tech educator, and the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel. I'd like to take a moment to thank Dorna Moini and Gavel for hosting this series. Today, Alex Bainov, an estates and corporate lawyer and owner at Contrast Law, will discuss the topic, Power Up Your Estate Planning Practice Through Tech Integration, Clio and Gavel. Feel free to post your questions in the chat as you think of them, and Alex will pick them up once he concludes. After questions, I will share some announcements and do a quick wrap up. After which, you're free to stay on the call for an optional 5 minutes of speed networking, where I'll invite a few people to introduce themselves for about 1 minute each. You can let me know or Trisha know in the chat if you'd like to introduce yourself during that portion of the call. I'd now like to introduce today's speaker. Alex is a lawyer based out of Manitoba, Canada, and the owner of Contrast Law. His practice focuses on estate planning, estate administration, and corporate matters. Alex has a Bachelor of Commerce degree and a law degree, both from the University of Manitoba. After law school, Alex articled and practiced with a large firm for a few years, then joined a small firm for over 5 years, and he's now been running his own solo practice for the last 5 years. Alex enjoys learning about new tech products and figuring out how various apps can help improve his practice. He's a member or volunteer with many organizations in Manitoba, particularly those relating to estate planning. Alex immigrated to Canada at the age of 15, so he says you'll have to excuse his accent at times. So thank you so much for being with us today, Alex. The floor is now yours.
Thanks, Brittany. Well, thanks very much for the invitation and for people joining us to chat about this. It's a pleasure always to chat with the community, and I want to thank Dorna and Gavel developing a great product that we can use every day. So to start, I'll share my screen and we'll start chatting. Maybe you can just confirm, Brittany, that you can see it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So today's topic is really the integration between Gavel and Clio, and how you can potentially utilize that in your practice. And I think this is a pre-conference in terms of estate planning. The estate planning in the US differs a bit from Canada because there's a lot more trust planning that's done in the US. So I think some of the features that are available and what you can do with Gavel is actually more extensive than for some users in Canada. So, you know, people in the US are actually, I'll call it luckier that they can utilize even more things to streamline their practices. So some people that may be watching this may not be using Clio. And so maybe that's part of your reason to participate and see what the integration is and how it works, and whether that's something that you can use in your practice. So to start, I want to say that Clio has an internal document automation built in. And it's really, there's two portions to it. One is it's a document automation, but I really think of it as perhaps mail merge that's a little bit more advanced than a regular mail merge. So you can go and create a document from a template. So you can store a template within Clio and then go and create basically a document from that template. However, you still need to type in matter number and how you want the naming to be. That all has to be manual. Although you can create a PDF document and create a Word document at the same time, there's still, in my view, a lot of manual work that has to be done. And you can't really create sets of documents with the same flexibility. And it also, in the past, I have found it doesn't have the same flexibility on logic and conditionals as you can have through Gavel. Clio does have another product sort of under their umbrella, which is Lawya. It used to be a standalone company that got bought out by Clio, and now it's part of their packaging. I used Lawya for a very short period of time before I actually found Gavel that used to be documented at the time. But since I found Gavel, I haven't looked back. So I probably used about 6 or 7 different products before finding Gavel. And at the time, I can't speak to Laya product now. They may have changed, but at the time, the conditionals and other flexibility that Gavel has provided, I couldn't find that in any other product. And the ease of use and coding and just how easy it was to use the product overall. So the other part that I want to mention is I want to give a huge credit to the Gavel team on creating a tremendous learning center. So if you go help.gavel.io, they have a huge learning center with all kinds of topics being covered. Basically, anything that's within the product, it's being covered, including even their Gavel blueprint that was recently released in the fall, integrating AI and generating workflows based on AI. For those that are looking potentially using Gavel for their estate planning and estate administration practice, under the building guides, there's actually guide to estate planning workflows. So it will start giving you some ideas on some of the things that you can automate, how you can consider building out your workflows and documents methods and so on. So definitely check out that help center. They've done a great job, and there's a lot of information that will get you on your way. So to get back to the integration between Clio and Gavel, at the end of the day, the reason I like the integration is you can have a questionnaire that really asks very limited number of questions. And then Gavel can go and pull that information into the document based on that one single answer. So as an example, if I have in Clio this matter for Howard Wolowitz, I can have a document that basically puts in all of the information based on the information stored in Clio, but that's all of this information is being brought in based on a single answer in a workflow. So as an example, this is the workflow that I have for this particular document. So you can see the only thing that's being asked here is just what is the file number. Now, based on this answer, I can then code a document that will go and pull in all the various information out of that matter based on that single answer. So if I look and not just information on a contact and an address, it could pull information from related contacts, any of the custom fields. So if I click on custom fields, for example, in here, if I have trustees indicated, their names, if I have minors, like you can really set up custom field sets in Clio however you want. And so just by answering that one question, now my document can go and pull in that trustee's name and the address and so on. So I'll give you an example here. So if I open this document, as you can see, I only answered the question on a file number, but it pulled in the trustee name and the address based on that Clio connection. You may have noticed that on the file number here, I have 003, although the Clio number is actually with 4 zeros. And that's again because I'm pulling a custom field based on that Clio connection. So that is a very powerful information connection that you can just, based on a single answer, you can pull a lot of information. Now, you can also do connection based on a contact, not just a matter. And if you do a connection based on a contact, same idea where there's custom fields that you have for that contact, then Gavel will be able to go and pull all of that information from that contact just based on your selection in Gavel questionnaire. So for example, for estate planning, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of how I have it set up, but obviously different workflows, you can customize it however you want. But let's assume I'm starting a new workflow for creating an estate plan. So I may be selecting a matter here, and then I'm selecting what type of documents I want to generate for this specific individual. And you're really selecting the individuals. You might be selecting genders because you can basically code it that you will change, obviously, the pronouns based on the genders as however you want. In here, I have a question that says, do you have a spouse involved? This is a yes or no because it's essentially subsequent pages in my workflow are based on this answer. So if I select no, it's automatically going to hide certain pages. And if I select yes, it's automatically going to show certain pages, allowing me to select whether the spouse is going to be a primary executor or a primary trustee and so on. So if I select yes, then it would give me another option and I can select the spouse as a contact as well. And in here, essentially, you can then go through the questionnaire. And as if you've explored Gavel in the past, you know that there's different types of questions. You can have single select, you can have multiple selections, multi-select questions. So you really repeating questions. So here's an example where it's persons involved. It's a repeating item question. So like for somebody like trustees, you can certainly store that information in Clio, which makes it, if your process and your workflow in the practice is such that you automatically put all the contacts involved in the plan in Clio, it would make it actually a lot easier than, for example, if I don't do that, I have to enter that information in the workflow. But if you have those contacts in Clio, it makes it a lot easier for you to actually pull that information directly without having to enter it in the workflow. So as you go through, essentially fill out the information, and at the end of the day, what is going to produce is you can have a set of documents like produced based on really, 4 or 5 questions. So in this particular scenario, I'm actually jumping to a probate instead of a planning just for the sake of time. But in this probate example, I have only 6 pages with this last confirmation on land. So really, it's not a very long summary page and the questions that were asked. But just based on these answers and my Clio connection, this is the result that I would get on production of documents. So you can see, and like, I'm not going to count them, but there's a lot of documents that get produced as a set just based on in my view, very few questions that are being answered because of that Clio connection that it's been pulling in that information out of Clio. The flexibility in Gavel is tremendous in a sense that you can name the documents however you want. You can customize the fields, the appearance of the fields within the documents. But as if you see here, as an example, Gavel is actually going and getting my custom field out of Clio for the document number. I'm customizing it based on how the last name appears, how the first name appears. In this case, you see that it's a first or last name, first name, and it also says 4. It's because in my questionnaire, this particular Hallie here is actually a minor, and I've indicated that she's a minor. So as a result, there's a separate document that gets produced where Howard will be signing that as a parent. Now, the flexibility that you have on getting that information out of Clio, if I show you an example of this PDF, you'll see that on this acknowledgement, I have Howard's name as first and last name only when he's signing for Hallie. If I go and find, for example, his acknowledgement, So just bear with me for a moment. Now, his personal acknowledgement actually has his full legal name. And again, this is all based on the coding in the document, because through Gavel automation, I basically telling the document to go and get his full legal name out of Clio instead of only first and last name. So there's a lot of flexibility in that, in the connection. So it's just a matter of how you want to customize it. Now, if you when you're setting it up, I find that custom fields would provide a lot of ability for you to run your practice more efficiently. So it really depends on what you want to set up. So an example for this probate file, my personal preference would be like, I want the information on the date of death, might be the court file number, who the executors are, who the beneficiaries are, and so on. And that's because if I fill this information here in Clio, because I probably want that information in my practice management software in any event, again, all I have to do is select the file number in Gavel on the production of documents, and it will go and get this information for me out of Clio without me having to answer those questions in Gavel again. The other nice part that you can have is repeating items. So I find it's a very, very powerful feature in Gavel where you can produce multiple documents, essentially the same document for multiple people at the same time. And if you look here as an example, I have an acknowledgement of receipt for Bernadette and also for Howard. It's because the workflow is set up to actually produce the exact same document for multiple people, because that's a repeating item question in my workflow. So there's a lot of power that comes with that. And you can basically indicate whether it's a repeating item and whether you want that to be produced as a separate document for every individual or every item in that repeating item question. So Brittany, do you want me to run through a specific workflow?
That's up to you. We have about 4 minutes of time left if you want to use it.
Okay. You know what? Let's just check questions. Maybe before we.
I have a quick question,
Sure.
and then everyone can think about their questions if they want. Because there is the ability to send the documents back into Clio as well. And, you know, if you kind of set it up that way. So I was just curious if you use that, and if not, if you also use any kind of zaps or use any like the email automations to make things send automatically, and how any of the other automations that happen kind of after this point.
So I personally, because I'm a solo, I don't have as much need potentially to push information to Clio. But you can certainly set it up where that may be useful. So if you're part of your workflow, and it really depends on the setup of the practice, but if your workflow is that you send out, let's say, an intake form that somebody completes, and based on that intake form through Gavel, you want to push the information into Clio, that can be certainly a helpful connection. Now, sometimes you may need to still be mindful as to how you're setting up the workflow and how you can control whether it's the capitalization on your preferences on data consistency. So I do use Gavel for like some preliminary forms for clients to complete in terms of name, address, and so on. So it's helpful. I do find I send essentially trigger emails to myself so I know when the person has completed a certain step. But it really depends on the workflow of the practice, whether you actually want to use the zaps. And it may be a notification goes out to a lawyer when a client completes, or an assistant if the client completes a specific form. So it really depends, I think, on the practice.
That makes sense. We do have a question from Dorna. Dorna, do you want me to read it, or do you want to unmute and ask Alex?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you so much, Alex. This is super helpful to see your process. I was just wondering how, I know you mentioned a little bit about your probate practice. I was wondering if there have been any big differences between the way that you've automated your estate planning practice versus your probate practice, and what types of documents you were able to automate, and how you actually ran that process, if any.
So I think the biggest difference for me is the custom field sets that I have. So if I give you an example, I think my screen is still sharing. So on this estate administration, for example, my practice is that I would have all the beneficiaries entered in Clio as contacts and as related contacts to that particular matter. So on a probate or estate administration side, it's actually, I can produce potentially more documents, or it's a faster connection with less questions in the workflow than my estate planning side potentially. Because on estate planning, my current workflow is that if I have like 5 different beneficiaries, I don't necessarily enter them into Clio as contacts, which means in my workflow, then I have to have that repeating question or some other way to enter their information so I can pull that into the document. So it really depends what person's workflow is. I know that some people actually will enter all the contacts. Like if they have 10 beneficiaries on an estate plan, they actually enter every single person that they have as a contact. So in that type of scenario, then it would be even easier for them because they wouldn't have to enter that information in a workflow. But I think that's probably the biggest difference is the use of custom fields. On my estate administration side and the corporate side, I use a lot more extensively custom field sets than I would on my estate planning side. But the other thing I want to highlight on the estate planning side perhaps is Gavel has you can use images, you can use CSV files. So one thing, for example, I use extensively on the planning side is many clients will have charitable donations going out as part of their estate plan for me. And so I have a CSV file with hundreds of charities listed in that CSV file. And that is a tremendous help to be able to access that CSV file in your workflow. I just go and use the charity and basically select the name. And when the document is produced, it pulls in the name, the address, the charitable registration number with the revenue agency. So all of that information comes in just because I typed in a name of that particular charity. And I also don't have to think about, did I spell the name correctly? I just start typing in and it will search that CSV file. So like CSV file is very powerful as well.
That's really helpful to hear how you use that specifically. So we do have a question from Tracy. Hi, Tracy. She asked, do you want to unmute and ask, or do you want me to read it out, Tracy? I can read it for her. So she asks, do you have any workflows that clients complete without meeting with you? For example, links to workflows on your website to generate documents. Oh, I think you're muted. Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. So I do have some forms that they complete through my website or the links that I provide to them. Because I'm a solo, I don't, right now, my current workflow, I don't have documents that are generated without me first seeing that document. So essentially the form that I have client being completed, it triggers an email where I get that document essentially after the completion. The client doesn't get a PDF or a Word document of it. But the Gavel system is so versatile that you can do whatever you want to do in a sense of like, do you want it to go to you and your client? Do you want it to go just to you? If depending on the plan you subscribe to, obviously there is the ability to have bundles feature. So you can have multiple workflows linked together and you can actually set that one has to be completed before the other. So there's a lot of flexibility. I find I personally just don't have that set up where the client gets a resulting product or a document without me first seeing it and reviewing it. But that's just my personal preference in my workflow.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much, Alex. I think that's all of the questions. So I am going to go ahead and wrap us up. If you don't have anything you wanted to add, Alex. Amazing.
No, I think that's it. And if people have other questions, I'm glad to answer it. And they can certainly reach out directly, or we can do it after the fact.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just pull up my slides really quick. So thanks again to Alex for that amazing session. So before we wrap up, I just want to let you know about a few announcements. So if you would like to get in touch with Alex, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn. As I mentioned, this session is part of a two-part mini-series designed to build community in advance of the Heck for Link Institute, which I'll be attending next week. So if you want to say hi in person, I'll be in Orlando with everyone. The first session was with Tracy Troyer back in November, and she discussed the topic, how I automated my estate planning practice with Gavel. So you can view that session if you go on to Gavel's YouTube channel. Also, I'm going to be, since I'll be there in person in Orlando, you can join us for dinner after the day 3 of the conference on January 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to go to the Zero Urban Italian Kitchen, which is located right in the venue. So there's limited spots available. We only have 12 slots, so there's already only 9 left. So just reach out to me at brittany@gavel.io to reserve your seat. Also, we created a private Slack channel. So if you want to be a part of that private Slack channel where we're going to coordinate meetups and everything, you can let me know. Also, we have a special offer on from Gavel. So if you're new and you'd like to try out automating aspects of your own estate planning practice or other type of practice, you can get a free 7-day trial plus $100 off for your first 2 months. So after starting your trial, just email help@gavel.io with the code HackerLink2024, and a member of the team will apply the discount. And this offer is good until 11:59, January 12th. So that concludes the main portion of our Lunch and Learn session. A big thank you to Alex for sharing your insights with us. We'll now be transitioning into a 5-minute speed work networking that's optional, so feel free to go if you need to, but if you'd like to stay, we'll stop the recording now and move into the speed networking portion. So for those of you that need to go, thank you so much for coming.